Pennsylvania and New Jersey, the laws vary widely. I want to talk briefly about prenuptial agreements because that's a big part of my practice. And talk, if you will, Judy, for a second about how you approach prenups. And I'd like to talk about it then after you do.
Mm-hmm. Well, normally I would tell the client what the laws would be in North Carolina if they did not have a prenup, and how a prenup can potentially change that legal relationship, or what happens if the couple later decides they're going to divorce. So you also expect your client, as well as the other person, to give a full and honest disclosure about their financial assets, so that there isn't much of a chance that later on somebody can say, well, you totally lied to me. I didn't realize you were worth $50 million or whatever. It's very important to have some disclosures.
Right. I agree. When someone comes in for a prenup consult with me, I explain it as that everybody has a prenup. Okay. It's either the law, and this is a Pennsylvania divorce code that I'm holding up. Mm-hmm. This is your default prenup. If you don't get a prenup, if you're smart enough to get a prenup, and this is a prenup that I drafted. This is your prenup with a smiley face. This one's about 50 or 60 pages. Mm-hmm. So it's either what you want to have happen or what the state wants to have happen. So the choice is yours. You're going to either go through the state laws or your own. And I think that everybody should consider, who's getting married or considering it, should at least go through a prenup consult. And like you, I explain to anyone that comes in for a prenup consult, this is what the state law is. This is how the assets are identified and valued and distributed. So if you don't get your own prenup done, that's properly drafted and properly executed, you're going to end up at the mercy of state law. And usually, then we'll do a deeper dive into other things. Before I go on prenups through my lens, anything else that you want to discuss regarding prenups?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's always a good idea to have a prenup done if it's not your first marriage, or even if it is your first marriage. If you have assets or the potential to have a lot of assets, inheritance, anything that you want to protect, because you always, unfortunately, this is what the attorney is there to do, is to think about the worst case scenario. How are you going to be protected? We know that you're in love and you're planning the wedding, or your soon-to-be wife is planning the wedding. Everybody's happy, but we've seen it all go south after a few years or 20 years down the road. So how would you feel if you had to give 50% of all your 401k to somebody that you can't stand, or you feel that squandered away all your assets or cheated on you?
Right, exactly. We're both in what's known as equitable distribution states. So you could end up giving more than 50% of the marital assets to the other side based on a number of factors, but we'll get to that in a minute. I would also advise anybody who's considering getting married to get a prenup that's properly drafted even before the wedding invitations are printed, well before any planned wedding. Why? I haven't done one prenup where it doesn't come back to me with changes. And you don't want to wait until a month before the planned wedding to call an attorney and say, I need a prenup. You want it done months in advance, or as far in advance as possible. You don't want anyone under duress. You don't want anyone to say, I was rushed. I put down deposits for everything, and I felt like I had to sign it. A lot of times people come in from out of town, they make plans for your wedding, and you didn't want to disappoint them. So months in advance, you're going to put yourself in a much stronger position if the prenup is ever challenged based on duress. So the other thing is, I've set aside prenups, and oftentimes I see people come in with a prenup that they drafted themselves or bought off the internet, and it's a piece of garbage. I've had cases where the other side will have a prenup after the divorce file is plain. I'll be presented with a prenup, and I'll call opposing counsel and say, are you really going to waste time litigating this? Because it's so defective that it'll never hold up. then they'll have to go back and explain to their client it's not worth thousands of dollars to try to have this upheld. He's right. So penny wise, pound foolish. If you think you're going to copy a prenup from the internet or try to get one for free from someone that had one from another jurisdiction, they're all like custom made documents. No two cases are exactly alike. And it's better not to get married than to have a prenup that's defective and you think you're protected, because it's going to get set aside. And we don't want that to happen. We want you to have a prenup that works. So anything else on prenups before we keep going here?
No, but you do bring to mind, I haven't seen this with poorly drafted prenups, but definitely with poorly drafted do-it-yourself separation agreements. I've seen that so many times when people, show me some piece of garbage that they typed up themselves, piecing together something they found on Google or one of those, cheapy sites like LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer or whatever. It always has like weird language that nobody would ever put in there if you're a North Carolina licensed attorney. And plenty of times the language is too vague or poorly worded by the person themselves. And once again, it's not going to be something that can be enforced by a court.
Right. It's blatantly obvious to me that when a prenup comes in and it's purchased off the internet or it's drafted without an attorney, an experienced attorney drafting it, it's just not worth litigating. You're kidding yourself. So while we're on the subject of prenups, just another quick point. Prenuptial agreement law varies widely from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Places like Pennsylvania, and I'm making this video with Judy in 2022, the year 2022, it's really viewed as a contract. In other jurisdictions, it has to be fair at the outset, and it cannot be unconscionable at divorce. So, and even other jurisdictions that I'm familiar with, a judge can redline certain things and change the prenup. Pennsylvania doesn't allow that. Judy, do you want to say a little bit about how North Carolina handles prenups and how to best protect your clients?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, normally in any prenup, it would also say that the choice of law would be in North Carolina. So even if the parties move to another state, then, if by any chance the litigation is brought in a different state, the judge would supposedly still apply North Carolina law. So I actually haven't been involved in any situations where we had to invalidate a prenup, because I think prenups are still pretty rare. I had a live stream on my channel, Asian American Legal Focus, with an attorney, Steve Epstein, who also said that, yeah, that's very rare that I have people coming in who have prenups.
Right.
Yeah, but in North Carolina in general, they would be enforceable, especially if you have a real attorney representing both sides. It's all like, formally drafted, signed, and notarized by both parties.
Right. I get a lot of comments on my videos where people from other jurisdictions say, my brother had a prenup and it got set aside. It wasn't worth the paper it was written on. I'm here to tell you that it depends upon what jurisdiction you're in and how the prenup was drafted. You have to really be careful. You have to be meticulous in the drafting, in the execution, how everything's done, because you're going to get tripped up. It's not a do-it-yourself kind of document. Matthew R., thank you for